interested in. All right. We're rounding off our Africa Roundtable for the night. What's happening in the rest of the continent? 2 or 3 big highlights that we should be aware of?
One big highlight is the meeting that was in Cairo on Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, on the Great Nile Dam, a multi-billion investment in the continent, JJ, that if we are not going to focus on the water crisis and then the issue of energy crisis, there will be conflict in those 3 African countries. The second one, our deputy president, who's a special envoy on the southern Sudan, was in Juba, meeting with the envoys from Uganda and Kenya, dealing with the question of the South Sudan. The last window period, actually, for Salva Kiir and Riek Machar to find their feet. And I think the other key story, JJ, elections in Namibia being announced Saturday. And I've said to you earlier, Namibia has dropped new...
When you say they announced, you're taking results?
Results, JJ. Yeah. They had
or
elections
the outcome of
last week, Wednesday, actually. They had elections on the 27th. Yes. I think you were in Western Cape with the refugees there. Namibia was having elections Saturday.
They want to walk to Namibia.
They wanted to walk there. Okay. So elections...
They'll have to deal with the new government.
Correct, JJ. Elections in Namibia, I think, being announced. There was a delay, opposition lamenting. And I think, like you said, Botswana has raised it. Now, the Kenyan reconciliation aspect between Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta is very critical.
Yeah, please tell me more about that, because I'm going to be in Kenya next week and I would like to pick up on this.
Basically, it's maturity of our leaders. You saw Uhuru and Odinga apologizing for each other and apologizing to the nation on the way that they ran their campaigns and on the way that they have splitted or created deepening of hatred among their supporters, which in Kenya translate also to tribal element. So that exercise of publicly, they did not only do it privately, they had a long conversation. After the conversation, they went public to display that brotherly relationship.
Yeah. Is there something there about power sharing that is also on the table?
There is discussion on working together, not necessarily power sharing, but more understanding.
So there was a discussion about creating a prime minister role for Odinga. Am I missing the boat?
You are correct, but that one is still not complete. But what is
under discussion, you think?
It is under discussion. But what is firm is the understanding that our differing does not make us enemies as African people. Differing is healthy. We must differ and find a better solution than either of our initial views.
Yeah. I think JJ, DRC as well, should not forget, Tshisekedi came into power this year. It was not so long that Felix Fathi Tshisekedi, but it's like he's missing the point. He's almost traveling now, dealing business, economy. He's losing the point. DRC is facing Ebola crisis, the current crisis in Beni and Goma. Those are the Ebola zones. Yeah. But we have a crisis where people don't have confidence. There's a trust deficit on the UN peacekeeping missions. South African peacekeepers have been there since 1996 or maybe 2003. Yeah. I'm not certain of the dates, but we have been there for long. Now you look at our role in the DRC, is very critical, JJ. Zimbabwean elections, not elections, Zimbabwean crisis, actually, of economy, I think is something we should look into. Afrophobia, xenophobic issues that came to this country, JJ, September. I think when I was in Abuja last week, JJ, more than 15 papers from conflict resolution experts, they were beating up the bush, JJ. They were just chopping on a round tree, alleging that South Africans are xenophobic.
Yeah.
You know, the media, they have a tendency to say South Africans
but the xenophobia, a big issue this year.
It's a big issue,
but treated differently from the past xenophobic incidents, in that you now had, protests in other countries saying, South Africa, please stop with your nonsense. Right? And having a president go to apologize in Zimbabwe. What do you make of that? Do you think that was a move in the right direction, that this matter now is being handled by Africans, all of them, and putting pressure on a different way to deal with each other?
We continue to deal with symptoms.
Yeah.
That's our problem, because there was this issue here, there was a similar issue in Ghana.
Yeah, yeah.
There was so these issues need us to deal with the fundamentals. It is good that we do the PR work,
Exercise.
but PR is not. It needs to be backed up by real
Actual
action.
work. Yeah, the president sent
So we-
envoys. You didn't make anything of it? You sent envoys around the continent.
I like I indicate, I think that that was PR.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not followed by deepening of people-to-people relations,
Relations, yeah, yeah.
which is where we need
Cultural
to move
diplomacy
to.
come in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need
But
to
what,
put
how
finance
exactly are you going to
behind-
do people relations? Let's talk
JJ,
concretely now
let me go there.
between
on it
Nigeria
now.
and South Africa.
And South
for
Africa.
example.
JJ, when I was there, I have raised it actually. Cultural diplomacy through music, through culture, through sports, JJ. Now, as we are talking, South African artist Yvonne Chaka Chaka is in Angola now, in Luanda, for the past 8 days. It's a culture season. The thing that is raising, I think, the envoy reports. Where is the envoy reports that can feed into practical steps? To say, after we have done reconciliation with our African countries, JJ, after this mayhem, how do we move forward? And like we say, what are the sticking blocks between us? Nigeria and South Africa are the big brotherhood, JJ, in the African continent, economically, culturally, musically. When you look at how even the young artists were fighting on the social media, you know, Africa Unite concert being cancelled. So you can see the impact goes on a cultural level, but social cohesion, JJ, the issue of African solidarity must be understood in terms of what you were saying earlier, fundamentals. What are the fundamentals of African countries? The issue of crime, the issue of corruption, the issue of illegal immigrants or the migrants, when actually for Europeans too are the migrants, but we see Africans as migrants alone. You know,
Yeah.
so for me, JJ, the issue of culture season within the Ministry of Arts and Culture should be broadened and be felt by young people of this country, because I think
Yeah.
the relation of us and South Africa, Nigeria must even come to an end where we look at the African continent as a key structure.
Yeah.
I've spoken about DRC. DRC, it is a crisis, JJ. Somalia, Sudan, those are the countries that have been embroiled in conflicts, and South Africa is just sitting back and say, but it is well.
Yeah.
Now, silencing of guns, how are we going to deal with that project come 2020, JJ,
Yeah.
when actually we still manufacture weapons in this country?
Yeah. The issue of cultural exchange is also interesting in the context of what, I don't know how to best summarize it, but this whole issue of not interfering in domestic issues and what have you. Just recently, the deputy president was lambasted for washing his hands over the policy of Uganda for banning of, I think, banning of gays and lesbians and so on. And he was challenged to say, but that's not what your constitution says, what are you going to do? Right? And he just basically just sort of washed his hands. Do you share his sentiments?
We need to entrench the culture of respecting individuals' choices
Yeah.
in the world. We need to provide that freedom for African people.
Yeah.
As it moves from social, it must also move to economical.
Yeah.
Going back to the question that you asked earlier in terms of what are the practical things that we need to do to entrench people-to-people relations.
Yes.
The easy, low-hanging fruit, it's academic exchanges. We got one-way direction as far as academics are concerned.
Yeah, that's true.
You find both from a students and from researchers and
Researchers, yeah,
leadership,
yeah.
it's coming down south.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We need to fund the other direction
Yeah, that's quite true.
because there is a whole lot to learn.
Absolutely. From various universities. in the
Looking at
continent.
what Rwanda has done just recently, it has basically established a city which it's light up by renewable energy and
Yeah.
self-sufficient. And we don't have such big projects this side. We could go and learn out of those
And learn.
experiences.
And learn.
Because also as Azanians, we end up being big-headed,
Yeah, yeah.
but from an empty position, because we have not had the experience that our fellow brothers already accumulated. We take it for granted that we're ahead, whereas reality tells otherwise.
All right.
So we need to exploit the academia as well as much as the
Absolutely. I think that's quite a practical
one,
thing there. Round it off for us, Advocate. 2 or 3 big highlights, some more in terms of the work that you have been doing on the round table, and what can we look forward to next year?
JJ, I think the major event that we have done on this show as well was to look at the African human rights question, the human rights issues. We have broadly looked at the people of disability. I think the show we had here with the ladies from Mpumalanga and Brian, I think that was one of the highlights of the show. And I think for us on your show as well, even I didn't engage on it, the restoration of human dignity of Babu Credo Mutwa. This year, I think it was a major story to look into.
Yeah.
And I think for us, again, JJ, the issue even around looking at the African leadership, we've been constantly raising the issue of African leadership, governance, APRM, corruption in the continent, elections. So I think those are the major stories that I think we have dealt with, conflict resolution, cultural issues, JJ, on this show. Starting this show with people like Kofi and Victor, there's been interesting how we looked broadly at the African continent. And like you have said, the intellectual exchange program should not happen only people coming to the south, but our young people must explore the north, the east, and the west part of the continent. Even the media, JJ, I think on your show we have emphasized that this show, come 2020, it must find itself broadcasting from one of the African capital cities.
Absolutely.
You know, so I think that it will be the vision that our roundtable must go into the trees, must go into the townships, to the villages, and then we get the groundings of Walter Rodney when we say we are grounding with our brothers and sisters from A to Z, Angola to Zimbabwe, JJ.
Absolutely. I'm going to be out in Kenya next week, and hopefully I'll be able to talk to a range of communicators from across the continent, and we could do an Africa roundtable that will bring back to our viewers. But thank you so much for your time and coming through. We didn't have time to talk about PAC, but that's fine. You're off the hook for today.
That's a book.
Well, we just want to know who's the current president. But if we can just know that, we'll be all right. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your perspective. And we hope we will see you some more on the Africa Roundtable in the future.
Thank you.
Once again, Mantula, thank you so much for the time that you have devoted to us throughout this year, really selflessly sharing of your wisdom. We really appreciate it. And on behalf of all of us here at YourView and Newsroom Africa, we thank you for always being available to come and share your perspective. All right. I hope you enjoyed that Africa Roundtable, coming to you live from Linden here in Johannesburg. But until we talk frankly again, may God bless you.